Okay, let's get this set up. Ready to go. We'll be going live very soon, folks. Get into it. This is the music they play during like gambling adverts. Guys, we're going to be covering topics, new topics, topics we discussed yesterday. It's going to be good. It's full preterism, baby. How we doing? Are we live? Are we live yet? Yeah, we're live. Okay. The music will be stopping now. It's probably way too loud. Okay, the music's now down. If you enjoyed that song, it's called Wait For It by SATV. And it's still playing really loud in my ears. Okay, so we're going to discuss the topics that came up last night. The reason that video came down is I listened to the audio quality. Now, I thought I wasn't being loud enough, so I turned the gains up to 100. So that the audio quality was quite poor. So I appreciate everyone that stood by me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize what we discussed yesterday, and we're going to get into some new topics today. Some important stuff, some important developments in the world of full preterism, as we will look at the ideas coming from the prince of full preterism. That's right. The prince of full preterism, Daniel Rogers, who has been called the protege of Don Preston in a Facebook group that discusses full preterism, which I am in. And I don't know if Daniel Rogers would accept that mantle or that framing. And I felt like the people discussing the topic of Daniel Rogers were being a little uncharitable. However, I would say that I think there's genuine criticisms that one could make regarding some of Master Daniel's opinions. But before that, guys, there's a moral pall that's come over the United Kingdom. Something of a disgusting movement. Now, if you're in the United States of America, you may not know the name Bonnie Blue. However, if you are in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, then you will indeed know the name Bonnie Blue. She is a famous whore. That might sound inappropriate, but she is a professional harlot. Her claim to fame is that she slept with over 1,000 men in a single 24-hour period. And we need to discuss what we're doing as a society. Now, this will apply to everyone. People in America have long lamented the pornographic industry and its strongholds in California. I learned that somewhere. I read it somewhere. Okay, I produce half of it. No, I think most Americans would say, hey, come on now. And I feel the same way. What's going on here? So I've got some ideas I'd like to share. On this. Something I brought up the other day. Have I still got it here? Yeah, it's okay. Cancel that. I'm just going to add another image to this, guys, to contextualize things a little more, because I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Hellraiser franchise. There's a character in it called Pinhead. Now, Pinhead is part of an interdimensional species, and they are called Cenobites. And they are priests of pain. They've given themselves over to an ideology of sensation, and they believe that the highest pursuit is the infliction of pain. So you might call them sadomasochists or sadists. They like to come up with different configurations of torture And I believe, and I would like to see this in a Hellraiser movie. The only reason I watched this is because when I was younger, I used to watch a lot of horror films. But this is important, right? Because I think it's going to contextualize the breadth and length of this discussion we're going to have tonight. See, the Cenobites are delusional, right? They've given themselves over to an ideology that says, hey, physical sensation, that's the best thing ever. But my argument is that physical sensation is an existential cul-de-sac. I want you to get that terminology into your common parlance. I want you to start saying that. Just start calling everything an existential cul-de-sac, right? It's cool. You're going to love it. But it's true. That's what the Cenobites have done. For all their advancement, for all their technology, to think what they could do, medical breakthroughs, scientific progress, a confederation of planets. No. Instead, they go around and start scratching people up and killing people and stuff. And it's just like, what? You've got spaceships that can travel through different dimensions, and you come to Earth to kill someone or to mutilate someone's flesh. And then you've got the sheer hubris, right? To quote Picard, if anyone saw the new Star Trek Picard show, it was diabolical until the final season was a mass. There's some beautiful moments. Highly recommend if you're a Trekkie. But, you know, it's just, what's going on? So I'm struggling. That was me filling to try and find the image that I wanted. Okay, this one I'll have to do. Right, so this is like my opinion on this piece. So there's Pinhead. As you can see, he's got some raw flesh because that's something that they like to do. His head's covered in pins. It's not an accident, not some industrial accident. That was something that Pinhead would have done deliberately to himself. Because physical sensation is the biggest deal in the world. So the article, I'm not going to spend money to read something of that caliber, but I do have it summarized. So I'll just get rid of it. Can I get rid of this one? Yeah, let's get rid of this one so we can see at least. That's Bonnie Blue. I don't know what they've done with her in the graphic design there, but my point is it looks a little something. It's basically the same deal as that. So the article says Bonnie Blue, an English adult performer, right? Is that what we're calling her? An adult performer? I thought Krusty the Clown was an adult performer. But okay, Bonnie Blue. Probably could have come up with a better example. I regret Krusty the Clown. Don't know where that came from. Who recently shot to Dwayne The Rock Johnson is an adult performer. Recently shot to fame with attention-grabbing stunts, including a widely publicised petting zoo event. She was throwing off OnlyFans for the petting zoo event, where she was going to put herself in a glass box and allow people to do whatever they wanted to her. It's like, no, we don't need that moral injury, thank you. We're already, dealing with enough stuff, right? Don't add that to it. Yeah, she's a lightning rod figure and unexpected symbol of modern Britain, is what the article says, not me. Her rise reflects a shift in national identity? Really? Is this the shift in identity that we want? Britain now celebrates bold, boundary-pushing personalities where sensuality, spectacle, and scandal increasingly define cultural influence. Well, that's Hellraiser. That's the Cenobite creed. Sensuality and spectacle, scandal, revealing a country comfortable with controversy. I said that weird. A country comfortable with controversy, good alliteration, as part of its soft power. I mean, to a degree, you would want a liberal democracy to be comfortable with controversy. However, there comes a point where you go too far. You know what I mean? I invoke G.K. Chesterton, right? I believe it was him who said, before you knock a fence down, lean on it long enough to ask the question why it was put there in the first place. And Bonnie Blue didn't do that. she didn't lean. I mean, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? The article argues that Bonnie Blue isn't a fringe figure, but I don't want her to be emblematic. She's emblematic of deeper trends. Britain's embrace of provocative branding and online attention culture, wherein daring public personas eclipse traditional institutions in shaping the national image. This phenomenon points to a broader transformation in how Britain presents itself to the world, less bound by decorum or restraint, more reliant on attention as influence, and increasingly comfortable with sensationalism as national identity. Right, okay. So I am not happy about that, not one bit. I think that's a problem. I think, you know, didn't she recently go over to visit Andrew Tate? Andrew Tate's a product of Great Britain and America. I think he had a parent that was American and a parent that was English. So this is our issue. This is our issue, USA. You know, I've got this opinion that I think I've heard some people speak about empire. I think empire's an inevitability. Like, it's just, you know, technological prowess, spreading influence. And I think there's a lot of soft empires today. You might disagree with this thesis entirely, but I would say that the main empires today are like, what, the USA, maybe China, and Europe to a degree. And I think Europe is like run by Germany and France. It's like a coalition of Germany and France, and they kind of basically run Europe. Like, they give funding to the poor European countries and stuff. Obviously, Italy's got a bit of a say, Spain's got a bit of a say. But I'd say that's an empire run by the French and the Germans. And then I would say China's doing a lot. China's like just extracting so much out of Africa right now. And then obviously you got America with its influence. And I would say that the United Kingdom is a vassal state of the USA. I mean, some people might say, oh, that's too far, but I believe it's true. You know, it used to be, there was different empires, and now there's other kind of different soft empires. And the only reason I say that is because, well, we have an allegiance, right? We have these different allegiances. We have these different spheres of influence. And, you know, I think America's done well to correct this Bonnie Blue-ism of the world, right? Some people will argue if the tone's right and if it could be corrected and mediated slightly better, but that's a lifetime of work, right? Nobody's going to get that dialed in perfectly. It's like me with my microphone gains. I'm hoping this sounds good tonight. It might sound terrible, but this is the video that's staying up. So I might move on to the next topic. Just now, I just want to make sure I've covered everything I wanted to say on that, because, oh my goodness, guys, come on. Hellraiser, yep. This article reads like an invitation for Britain to unlock, oh yeah, the Pandora box. So that's how you unleash the Cenobites, is by you play with this little box and it cuts your hand and then your blood goes into it. Very symbolic, right? So yeah, Britain's unlocking a similar box. To treat cultural capital as a Pandora's box of performative excess is about trading legacy for virality, moral weight for sensation. When we exalt figures like Bonnie Blue as national avatars, Britain risks indoctrination into a worldview where influence is confused with meaning and spectacle with substance. So yeah, this is Cenobite Britain, is what I wrote in my article. I talk about that liturgy of the flesh, and we'll come back to that idea, okay? So let's take ourselves out of the existential cul-de-sac very briefly, just for a couple of minutes, just for a moment. Okay, we're back in it now. We're back in it. So let's get rid of this picture here. And let's jump in to see what Daniel Rogers is saying to it. All right, so we're going to turn this up. We're going to jump over here. And this is, I'm not going to listen to the whole video again like I did yesterday, but basically there was some controversy because Daniel Rogers, the prince, the crown prince of full preterism, He's not going to like that framing. I'm going to reach out to him. We'll reach out to him just now, actually, after we've listened to him. But essentially, what I believe Daniel Rogers is saying is he's noticing and lamenting the problem of evil. He's seeing suffering in the world, and he thinks, my full preterism, there's something missing. There's a component missing to it, because when I look out into the world, I see needs that are not being met. I see injustice, I see suffering, and I cannot be satisfied with that. And I would say, hallelujah, man. I would say, yes, amen. Let's not be satisfied with that. Let's push forward. So let's just hear a little soundbite of what he's saying.
And how could it all be over in 80/70, right? If you look at Jesus, his compassion, his love, his mercy, his irritation at injustice, his desire to sit with people at wells and sit with them at the table and call them out of trees, then how could it all be over at 80/70? How could this story just be about the fulfillment of one covenant that was given on Mount Sinai 1,500 years before Jesus, promises made to Abraham 500 years before that? How could that be the end of the story? How could that be it? If God really is love, there has to be so much more than death and decay and pain and suffering and destruction. And so, yes, I'm a preterist. Ask me to interpret 1 Thessalonians 4. Ask me to interpret 2 Peter 3. I have to stay true to what I see in the text. But at the same time, I'm so hopeful that the gospel really is the power of God in the salvation, that the gospel really can abolish death. And that if you and I believed that, even a little bit, then we could move mountains.
But like, so what is Daniel saying there? Like, we need to believe that it can really abolish death. It's like, I might be misunderstanding Daniel here. I hope he isn't thinking about like mortal, like the death of the biological body. I mean, he's a full preterist. He must understand that there's other ways to interpret death rather than that which is experienced through mortality. There's a death that's relational in, how we relate to God. There can be death, an absence of relationship, factors that blind us to the grace and the faith and the love and the hope and the spirit. So I would hope, that he hasn't departed from that, the full richness and spiritual insight that can be gleaned from the full preterist position. Didn't like when I used the word departed there. I don't like using that old terminology, right? But you get what I'm saying, right? So if I can summarize, like, he makes allusions in this video to his grandmother who passed away with cancer. And, when I hear him talk about himself as a father, I'm thinking, this is a young man who's 32 years old now, and he's thinking about his own children, and he's had his grandmother pass away, and now he's got this child, and he wants this child to grow up in this better world, right? That's my take on this. So I completely share his sentiment. However, it's almost as if he's waiting for more. He's saying, like, there's more, that Jesus needs to come back just a wee bit more physically and sort some stuff out to the degree that we stop dying, to the degree that we stop feeling pain, to the degree that things like the cancer that killed grandma, that's gone. And my response to that was, well, okay, let's just say you did that. Let's just say that you presented this pristine world where there wasn't suffering, pain, and death. Have you resolved that issue for all those people who died? There is 1,000 generations of forefathers that I have, that you have, 1,000 generations of foremothers that we've all had. They all died. They all suffered. They all lived these rich, meaningful lives that came to an end. So if you have this pointless line in the sand and say, well, everybody now just gets to live forever and not experience discomfort, then what you've done, essentially, is kind of slapped all those people in the face, right? Because you've not sorted it for them. They still had to go through it. So there's a tension there, right? You get what I'm saying. And I think the point, I try to make it as refined as possible. So he recently said he isn't a full preterist. citing the problem of evil. He expressed a desire to see the world transcend death and suffering. While I resonate with that hope emotionally, I find it logically insufficient. Billions of humans have already lived and died. They've experienced sorrow, trauma, and injustice. Transcending suffering now doesn't retroactively fix what they endured. So the reality of the experience that you're lamenting, Daniel, doesn't go away if at some point in the future you seemingly tweak it and fix that. That thing that bothered you happened, is happening. The question is, how do you resolve this? How do you deal with this? And I understand what you're getting at because I feel it too, but I think we can come to a more elegant solution. Moreover, envisioning a world stripped of all suffering raises difficult questions. If human life were reduced to a state without tension, without struggle, without consequence, would it still be recognizably human? Would it not become a static hum of sterile comfort, devoid of contrast, devoid of meaning, devoid of growth? True resolution can't come from sanitizing reality into a utopia. It must come from a deeper understanding of redemption that embraces what has been, not merely what could be. So I think we have tools, I think we have ways, and to Daniel's credit, I think he's wrestling with something emotional that everyone experiences, but he does also cite the work of Mike Miano. Mike Miano's a full preterist. He also wrote a book this year, which is titled Full Preterism. And if anybody's got a few spare rupees to throw around, then I'd recommend supporting Mike Miano as well. Daniel says that he does a lot of great work. Is it Blue Point Community Church or something Mike has? Like, Mike Miano does a lot of good work, you know, someone who's turned his life around, leaned into the Lord, and he's doing a lot for his community. And Daniel recognizes that as this wonderful work that he wishes he was participating in more too. You know, he recognizes the poverty in people just down the block, you know, down the road from him, and he thinks, gosh, you know, there's probably more I could be doing. Instead of sitting here with my books and my scholarship, perhaps I could be doing a little bit more. And of course, the answer to that question's, yeah, man, like, I could be doing more too. Don't kick your ass over it, you know, like, just try and do what you can do, man. Try and do what you can do. Be the best Daniel Rogers you can be. You know, don't try and be Mike Miano. Don't be envious that you don't have his particular skill set, you know, but still, I totally understand I know I don't want to frame this in properly. I'm not saying he's jealous of Mike Miano. I'm just, you know, he recognizes something in Mike that he wants to, don't we all? Whenever we see someone do good works, man, it's addictive, right? Makes you want to participate in it. So, yeah, Danny boy, not bad stuff. You know, just a wee bit, you know what I'm saying? So he made another video too, because once Daniel put this video out, a lot of people were teasing over it, saying, oh, look, Daniel's got an issue with full preterism. Haha. And I'm like, well, that's not the right spirit. You know what I mean? That's not how we do it. So let's hear I've got a little sound clip here from his second video where he tried to refine his ideas a little bit. Let's listen to a little bit of this.
Biblically, right now, yeah, preterism. That's what I've believed for 10 years. That's I can't read scripture any other way than that because of my viewpoint, how I approach the text, how I think about the text, how I think about Revelation, all these other things, and the dating of the books, all of it, right? But when I encounter the risen Christ through the word, the message that I hear is there's work to be done. There's healing for the nations. The Spirit is flowing like living water. All who are thirsty may come and drink. All who are hungry may come and sit at the table. And I know that that's not mutually exclusive to preterism. A lot of people misunderstood that. I don't think it's mutually exclusive either. But what am I emphasizing? Am I emphasizing thinking about the past, thinking about what happened in AD 70 or what didn't happen in AD 70 or what happened at the cross or what didn't happen at the cross? Or am I prioritizing living it out on a day-to-day basis, because if we're not doing that, faith without works is dead, right? And I'm inviting you into this journey of me being irritated at myself. That's where this irritation is coming from. Of being upset with myself, of being hopeful about myself, of showing myself so much grace. Because I feel like if I'm not displaying this kind of tension within here between my head and my heart and what I'm doing and what I'm not doing, and what I'm thinking, what I'm not thinking, what I'm struggling with, what I'm wrestling with, the limits of my own intellect, the limits of my own interpretation, the fact that I interpret scripture from a point of view because that's how I was trained to interpret it. And so all I've done in my whole life is done the best I could with the system of interpretation and approach to scripture that I've been given. And that's what everybody else, hopefully, at the benefit of the doubt, that's what everybody else is doing as well. Like, I invite you on this so that you can experience the freedom to be able to voice these things about yourself. And I'm not going to sit here and judge anybody who disagrees with me on these things. I'm not even saying anything you can disagree with, really, because I'm telling you just my own personal experience. I have so far to go. I am 32 years old, right? Jesus didn't even start his ministry till he was 30. I started when I was like 20, you know? And I have so far to go. So far to go. But I'm shifting in my thinking from prioritizing the knowledge up here to prioritizing the knowledge in here. I had a profound spiritual experience at the end of April, 1st of May, in which a dear, dear mentor of mine led me through this amazing prayer in which it's called two-way journaling. If you've ever done that, you should look into it. It's contemplative practice, but we did it audibly. And he led me through it, and I just had this amazing encounter with the risen Christ, in which I know it was coming from. I know that like all sorts of factors were contributing to my experience of this, but the wisdom that I got from that conversation was just so profound. I've told people this before. I have learned more about God through holding my son, through watching a sunset, through sitting on an overlook after a long hike, through embracing my wife, right? Than I have learned through any amount of reading and studying. And you could argue that my reading and studying set me up to experience those things in that way. That's amazing. All I can tell you is that in the darkest moments of my life, it wasn't a book that got me out of it. It was an experience like that, holding my son, enjoying the presence of my wife, going out on a date, going out on a walk, seeing the sunrise, seeing the sunset, being in nature with a friend, kayaking or hiking together. I mean, those sorts of things.
All right, so I'm going to build on his ideas there. So first thing I want to say, we have to build up people like Daniel Rogers. You don't understand it. Like, if you're in America and you have a community of believers round about you, that is so different from the United Kingdom. If Daniel Rogers came to the UK and started speaking like he's speaking in this video, we would put him in a mental institution. We would think he had gone clinically insane. He had an encounter with Christ. He's talking about studying the Bible and stuff. This man's clearly, right? And you probably experienced that in like the most secular regions of New York City or the most secular regions of California and Oregon and Washington State. I don't know if there's a bit more of a sort of resemblance to the United Kingdom in some of these regions, but it's just very secular. So you'll understand a little bit of what I'm talking about. What Daniel Rogers is doing here is rare as far as I'm concerned, and it's a beautiful spiritual relationship that he's nurturing. He's seeing the significance of a relationship with God in his life, and he's making sense of that as a young father now. And I had an experience not unlike what he's talking about. I'll see if you can see it. You might recognize that bird as it's a little sparrow. Hold on. Discard. There it is. It's a little sparrow, right? It's having a little bath in the sand or the soil there. And I just want to share it because I wrote some thoughts about this. And you'll see that I put a little image over here. This one here. This image here. Okay. So I watched a sparrow stuff its wee face there. A materialist perspective would notice a system of energy transference. My sentiments of it being cute would be reduced to an evolved cuteness response. Fair, but that feels incomplete. I wonder why a universe that seems to arbitrarily transfer energy isn't just some sci-fi snake eating its own tail. An Ouroboros power plant. A big sterile thermodynamic machine. What's with all the aesthetics? Again, you can say that my noticing the aesthetics is a survival bias, and it's not really aesthetic. It simply is. But even if we suck out all of the sentiment, it is a dead space fact that the universe created human brains that perceive what is here. We might reduce all the wee poetic annotations we make to ignorant nativism, but we still see it as this, and not the sheer efficiency of solar winds blasting charged particles wherever they're meant to go, or the Ouroboros machine. There's more going on. The universe has built itself entities to ponder. And I suspect energy transference is a narrative driver. It's the source code that produces all the wee dramas. And I think all the wee dramas matter. I think the sparrow stuffing its wee face matters. Now, the reason I share that with you in this image here of the Ouroboros is because I think it's sort of what this guy's talking about. You know, he's feeling his faith, right? Because what he said is, I've thought about my faith. Oh, I've thought about my faith, you know? And look, you know, anyone who's got into the deep stuff of this book, someone was saying, oh, I really want to read the last section. I've got 3 sections in this book. I want to read the last section first because that's where you talk about what Daniel's talking about. And that's the thing, like this, the middle chapters of this book is basically Daniel Rogers' kind of like theological headspace. You see all those books that were behind Daniel. And ultimately, what is that? A centimeter? That'll get you a centimeter, right? And you can pass that off and you can say, here, look, here's some fun ideas. But the real juicy stuff in this book, see, to be honest with you, the really, really juicy stuff, well, to me, the really, really juicy stuff is actually the first few chapters, because I think the most pressing question about full preterism is why the bloody hell didn't it catch on, right? If you can work that out, you've really done a lot. So I think the first few chapters are really important. But see the last couple of chapters here, this wee tiny section here, right? The last, it's probably a wee bit thicker than that actually. That's, you know what I mean? That wee bit there, that wee half centimeter there. Oh my goodness, right? How many words is that? Maybe like 100 odd, 100 pages. There's not 100 words. It's like 100 pages. But oh my goodness, that's where the juicy stuff is. Daniel wants that juicy stuff, right? That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. I mean, I could have phrased that better, but you know what I'm saying. We all want that juicy stuff, right? We all want it. And the thing is, I think that's how you know you're growing as a Christian. Oh, there's so many inappropriate jokes I could make, but it's not the right audience for it. I just, you know what? We're going to talk about free speech and the tolerance of comedy as well. There's something to be said for humour immersion as a therapeutic tool. Daniel's confronting a lot of the suffering in the world, and actually a really good coping strategy is humour. You will notice that army range, I don't know what an army ranger is, a military personnel, frontline nursing staff, doctors and surgeons, people who have to deal with the real viscera of this world. They have something that's called gallows humour. Now, gallows humour, or dark humour, is a coping mechanism. It's not to say these people are psychotic and they can find comedy in these harrowing experiences because they're mentally broken. It's the opposite. If these people did not have the comedy, they wouldn't be able to continue. You know, so understand, I think Americans understand this. They do. I mean, a lot of the edgiest comedy I listen to right now comes out of Austin, Texas. So, you know, we're all clutching our purses when people say something that's a wee bit too offensive in the UK now. But we used to have some really good comedians. Granted, some comedy can go towards the bigoted space. Not often. Some people say that and it's not true. Like, I think you're allowed to say whatever you want as long as it's not coming from a hateful place. And really, that's a very difficult determination to make, right? I want to be so sensitive here because I'm probably closer to a free speech absolutist than someone who wants to be extra careful, right? I think you should be able to express yourself with your full chest, right? Whatever God has put on you to say, you should speak your truth. So, and actually, on that note, let's have a little look at something. Let's have a little look at something over here. This is a petition. One of our most British and loved politicians by the people of this country is a guy called Rupert Lowe. He's an independent because he got kicked out of the political party he was with. People with their ear to the ground in America might know who Nigel Farage is. Nigel Farage was speaking at Trump's first presidency. But I don't like Nigel Farage. I think Nigel Farage is the wrong guy. The right guy is Rupert freaking Lowe. Now, he put out this petition because he wants to stop this country from arresting. Do you know how many people were arrested for social media posts in 2023? 12,500. 12,500 people were arrested in the United Kingdom for tweets and Facebook comments. And then the most staggering display of this, right? I think you probably know about the Nazi pug, where someone turned their pug into a Nazi to offend their girlfriend. Yeah, he got arrested. You might have heard of Chelsea Russell. You know, probably haven't, but Chelsea Russell posted lyrics to a song when her friend died. And because the lyrics were from a rap song and used a particular word, she was arrested and prosecuted. And it wasn't until much later she was able to countersue and get herself out of that situation. We had a police officer, Jason Joseph or something. His surname's Fawlkes. Fawlkes, Foulkes. Julian Fawlkes was a former police officer, and he commented about how there's a lot of anti-Semitism today. And he said it referencing something, and the police misunderstood his comment, arrested him, and served him a warning. And he was able to countersue, and that cost the taxpayer tens of thousands of pounds. So this country, there's so many examples. Like, even in Scotland, you might have heard J.D. Vance say it's illegal to pray in Scotland in your own home. And everybody said that's an exaggeration. It's not an exaggeration. Let me give you the context, though. If you live beside an abortion clinic in Scotland, and the people going to the abortion clinic can see you from your window, and you're doing this, and those people interpret your prayer as some kind of condemnation or judgment towards them, you can be arrested in Scotland for that. You're not the king of your own castle. You know, in America, you sometimes get those sheriffs in Florida who say, don't you dare try and rob someone. If somebody comes and breaks into your house, we recommend you shoot and kill them. Nah. If that happened in the United Kingdom, if you try to defend your home in the UK, you would be put away for ages. So anyway, the most emblematic case, right, is this, her name's Lucy Conley. Lucy Conley was a caretaker, and she looked after lots of different children in her community. And she had lost her child to National Health Service negligence because they misdiagnosed her child and unfortunately died away as a very young tot. She's left with a daughter who's 13 years old. But Lucy Conley, during the Southport massacre, so what happened, was it last year now? I don't even remember, blocked it out. But a Islamic extremist, a psychopath, ran into a Taylor Swift dance party full of 5-year-old girls and proceeded to stab and kill those girls. Just little... and she got upset. And she wrote a post and she said, look, see these illegal refugees? I don't care if you burn down their hotels. You should burn down the parliament as well. That's all she said. There was nothing racist about it. It was maybe the wrong thing to say. And then she took it down. She took it down herself without anybody telling her to do it. She took it down. And then she said, look, everyone who's rioting just now, I want you to be calm. I want you to be peaceful. Anyways, she was the Wicked Witch of the West because the state wanted an example. So they took Lucy Conley and then they prosecuted her for her hatred. Now, bear in mind, Lucy Conley sponsored a Nigerian doctor. So that Nigerian doctor is getting to live in the UK because of Lucy Conley. She has done more for immigrants than 99% of people based on that. And she's looked after diverse ethnicities as a childminder. Right? She would often say it was like the United Nations because she was looking after all these different children. Well, she was the wicked, the judges, the activist judges, they already had a broomstick, they already had a black hat, and they stuck that on her and said, you're the wicked witch, you're the racist. And I'll tell you something, there's an ideology out there, particularly in the UK, where, I hate to be crass, but I want to tell you the truth about what's going on in this country. Pedophilia should be the worst thing that could possibly happen, right? It's a heinous thing. Pedophilia is here in terms of severity, and racism is up here. In the United Kingdom, it's worse to be racist than to be a pedophile. Now, you might think that's completely absurd. How could you say that? That is the national statistics in terms of like how they prosecute crime in this country. And I'll give you a really good, vivid example, a terrible, vivid example. So Lucy Conley get put away for 30 months, right? She get put away for 30 months. So recently, 2 delivery drivers were delivering a television to a house in England, and a 14-year-old girl answered the door. Keeps happening, man. Anyway, those 2 bastards, they get put away for, I don't know, 20 months. They got 20 months. And Lucy Conley got 30 months for a tweet that she took down herself. Come on. And people are wondering, oh, it's the rise of the far right. It's the rise of the far right. And look, I want to be very clear about something, right? I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm not. And I'm not a bigot, and I don't hate people. I love people. I find difference charming. I really admire difference. But the way we are doing immigration, I know immigration's a big debate right now in America, The way immigration's been done in the United Kingdom and in Europe is a disgrace. And it's not just a disgrace for us, it's a disgrace for the nations where these people are coming from. Saudi Arabia has condemned the United Kingdom for being too lax with extremists. Saudi Arabia says the United Kingdom currently has 8 terrorist organizations functioning legally. Saudi Arabia is saying that about us. We've got 85 Sharia courts. We have schools where people that don't speak English as a first language in England. Now, we have to wonder, is that good for society? Because I'm an expert on social science, and I can tell you that diversity is not a strength. Again, that might sound like bigotry to some people. It's not. You can have people from all different places and all different, different schools of thought, different religions, different ethnicities, whatever. But you need to come together. You need to come together. You cannot have people with completely different ideologies living unintegrated in a society and think this is going to work out fine. It's like, oh, did that work out fine in Northern Ireland? Is that working out fine in Palestine? Is that working out fine in Yemen? Is that working out fine in South Africa? It's like, you need people to come together to transcend. There needs to be a hinge towards some kind of unifying love. And we just don't have that. We just don't have the sense. We don't have the sense. Like, I'm afraid to tell you some of the reports coming out of Europe when it comes to this kind of thing. And again, don't get me wrong. So men, and let's just start with that, right? Men commit the vast majority of violent crime. In the United Kingdom, men are 10 times more likely than women to commit murder, while 2 to 4 times more likely to commit violence offences in general. And that's a human issue. Okay, it's not a racial issue. It's not anything bigotry or hatred. It's just an evolutionary fact that men have a certain neurochemical concoction going on in their brain that makes them more, in their upper body mass and the muscle strength and stuff, we're more violent. We have the propensity to be more violent. But the key factor is culture. Right, and we have to draw that line in the sand and say, some cultures are better than other cultures. And you might think, oh, that's quite a bigoted thing to say. Okay, you think that's a bigoted thing to say. Let's do a little tour of the world. Let's do a little tour. Is it Papua New Guinea? Yes, there's a tribe in Papua New Guinea where children suck semen out of their father's penises as a rite of passage. I'm sorry if you think that crass. I'm sorry. That's the real world. You may think, you just made that up. I didn't. That was the way of life there until very, very recently, until 5 minutes ago. That was the practice, right? It was ritualized pedophilia. Are you going to say that, the culture in Austin, Texas is inferior or is on a par with that? No, it's not. No, it's not. There's something that's despicable about that we recognize as wrong. So let's not pretend. Iran. Let's take Iran, for example. That's a topical example. Look, I've got no appetite for war. But in Iran, it's illegal for women to sing and dance. Does that sound good? Does that sound like, oh, that's a winsome culture? In Iran, women have to wear the hijab. They have to cover their skin. Elsewise, men will see women and rape them. That's the ideological underpinnings of the hijab. It's not it's just some wonderful cultural thing. The theological underpinnings, the psychological underpinnings, the construction of the hijab is to hide the temptress woman lest she visit rape upon her, because she's going to be so desirable and men can't be held liable to contain themselves. So let's cover them up. Does that sound like it's on a par? That's the Ayatollah of Iran. Only very recently have women been permitted to drive, right? You want to be gay in Iran? I don't know, man. You may want to work on your knees and how much of a drop you can handle. It's just, there's a difference in culture. It's got nothing to do with race. It's got nothing to do with race at all. It's culture. If I was raised in one of these cultures, I would probably absorb the cultural milieu. But I think we can all agree that killing homosexuals is probably not good. It's not good. We don't like to do that. I despair. So, a Freedom of Information request found that foreign nationals are 5.36 times more likely to commit stranger rape than UK and Irish men. A study on grooming gangs found that 83% of those convicted, were Muslim men. That doesn't mean all Muslims are guilty. It means some communities aren't integrating properly, especially around gender norms. Oh my God, there was a crazy one recently where the lawyer argued that the defendant didn't understand the cultural norms, and that's why he raped a 15-year-old girl. Now, I'm sorry, but is that lawyer going to be put in jail? Because he has just slandered the whole of Afghanistan. Is it culturally acceptable to rape people in Afghanistan? I'll tell you right now, it's not. Because sex outside of marriage under Sharia law is a heinous crime. However, if you were to study and analyse how these people prosecute rape, it becomes very vague and opaque, right? Very vague at that point. So these are not racial issues. These are cultural issues. And this is why Rupert Lowe, the person with the talking about free speech, because I need to be very careful the way I frame this. I could go to prison for what I'm saying to you tonight. But I want to make it clear, I'm not judging people morally in terms of who they are. I'm not saying all people from this particular group or that particular group. I'm citing data with I'll put the receipts in the channel description. These are issues. Now, Rupert Lowe, who made this here, you know, this, once it gets over 100,000 signatures, it has to be debated in Parliament. Well, this is important, right? This is very important. So the grooming gang scandal is a massive one. The J report found that the reason white British girls were being raped was because the police and the council were too afraid to prosecute because they were afraid that they would be accused of being racist. Now, I cannot imagine a more backwards, just horrible thing to come away with. What a stupid thought. What a stupid thought. And 13-year-old girls, man. 13-year-old girls were being raped. And do you know what the police said? Do you know what the council said? They said, that's her choice. She has made a life choice. We're not going to touch it. On the record, this is data. You might think that you're being very hyperbolic here, William. You're making stuff up. You don't understand what it's like in Europe. You don't know what's happening. If you're listening to it from this, you know, if you're hearing this in America, we're falling, guys. We're falling. You know, we for decades this went on. Thousands, some estimate millions of working class white British girls were raped because of their race due to ethnic resentment from people from cultures, and again, not the whole culture, but specific people who are fucking cunts. Demons from hell. And it's like, I take it back to 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, New York City. Right, who was the issue? It was the mafia. Well, who were the mafia? They were Italian. Does that mean all Italians are bad? No. It was five families. Who were the five families? Well, it was the Gambinos. It was this guy, this one, and that one. Right. The head of it was John Gotti. They're from the south of Naples. They're from Sicily. So you see what I did there, right? You see what the Americans did? They got real specific. Real specific. They didn't just go into every Italian restaurant and blame every Italian and then worry, nobody talk about this because people might persecute Italians. Nobody wants to persecute Italians. Nobody wants to persecute Pakistanis. Right? They're calling them the Pakistani grooming gangs. Nobody wants to do that. The reason there's tension is because you're not prosecuting them. You're letting them away with it. So heads need to roll in this country. We've completely, there must be like 3 separate grooming gangs. There's a national, you're going to hear about this in America. If you're sitting in America and you've never heard of this scandal, you're going to be hearing about this. It's going to be on your local news station. And a breaking story out of the United Kingdom. It turns out the country just allowed lots of little girls to be raped for some retarded reason. That's what's going to happen. Some people will say the word retarded is a slur. It's not. It's not in my circles. It's perfectly fine. Shane Gillis uses it all the time. I used to work in care all the time. Those people have a sense of humour. It's not a slur. It's totally fine. So, in Sweden, SVT reported 75% of stranger rapes were by non-Europeans, and over half of all assault rapists were born outside of Europe. Finland, 2001 study found African and Middle Eastern men had 10 times the rape convictions when adjusted for background factors. In Germany, asylum seekers were 6.6 times more likely to commit sexual offences in 2017. In Oslo, Norway, every single assault rape from 2006 to 2009 was committed by a non-Western immigrant. So, this isn't about skin colour. You cannot console yourself that this is some fiction dreamed up by the far right either. This is what happens when unassimilated masculine values collide with liberal societies that have spent decades taming male aggression. And the result? Cultural confusion, silence, and women caught in the crossfire. And that's the other thing about this. Where are the feminists? Where are you? The feminists don't talk about this. They are dead silent, man. They are dead silent. Yeah, I mean, if you want, let's pay the WNBA women a lot more money. Okay. And then what about I don't think the feminists who are concerned about women's basketball are the same ones that are going to be conscious of the issues here in this country, but fuck. Man, they're not making any noise about this. And do you know why? It's because of what the J Report found. People are afraid to talk about the issue. So you know what the cost of that is? Lots of rape. You better get comfortable with rape. You want to come to the UK? The tourist board used to be visit Scotland to see the big 5 animals, the red squirrel, the deer, the sea lion, the otter. Now it's about how many fucking... You know what I mean? It's like... I don't know, man. Western masculinity has been defanged. But the masculinity that's coming into the West, that has not been defanged. If we only look at immigration through 2 lenses, economics and compassion, but then we ignore the cultural and social consequences, especially around unassimilated masculinity, then we're risking long-term damage, right? Daniel Rogers, do you want to talk about something? Do you want to engage with the pain in this world? If we could tell the truth, and again, I wrote a passage about the truth in my book. The truth isn't about being brutal. The truth isn't about hurting people. You know, some people will say something racist or bigoted and say, I'm just telling the truth. That's not what I'm talking about. If that's what you're hearing, it's not what I'm saying. The truth is conditioned by love. It's conditioned by spirit. Spirit and truth. Okay? Together. And the problem with all these woke ideologies, I'm using the terminology, the problem with all these woke-ass ideologies is they don't tell the truth. They're afraid of the truth, and they hide crimes because of their allegiance to some kind of false god, right? Again, I told you how it goes in this country. Pedophilia, racism. And I think it's like some distorted version of it, because they're not really anti-racist. They're not really I would actually say they're more racist because they don't see difference as a real thing. It's kind of like if anybody's watching this and is black or something like that, black, I hate listing different colours. I just find it crass, right? Because I don't see us all as like, I'm white. What does that mean? I'm white. What do I have in common with an Estonian Slav? What do I have in common with a Russian? What do I have in common with an Italian? You know, it depends. It's a spectrum. There's going to be similarities, but there's going to be massive differences too. I have more in common with a Nigerian Christian than my next door neighbour who's an atheist, right? There's more similarities between groups than within them. This is true. But again, the point is, it's not about pointing fingers willy-nilly and driving division. It's not about that. It's about truth and specificity. Again, go back to New York City with the the 5 Italian families from Sicily and South Italy. It wasn't Rome, right? It wasn't Rome. It wasn't Milan. It was south of Naples. It was Sicily. It was 5 specific families. And it's the same with these Pakistani rape gangs in this country. It's not the Chinese, because we call them Asian gangs as well. It's not the Chinese. It's not the Indians. It's not the Saudis, right? It's not the Egyptians. It's a particular group of Pakistanis. Oh, so it's all Pakistan? No, it's not all Pakistan. It's a particular place in Pakistan where they're from. Some people have isolated it down to the specific city, the specific area in Pakistan, but it is. That's a gang, man. And it's like, the less specific we get, we just inflame all these tensions. So, yeah, integration has to mean shared values, and our masculinity needs to be tempered, but absolutely present and celebrated. I actually think there needs to be like a Nuremberg trials for certain progressive groups who allowed this to happen. Again, the J report, is it the J report? Aye. There's a Casey report that's been done this year, and it stipulates, it lays it all out. This happened because people were afraid they would be called racist, right? That's why it happened. So we can't let that, we can't do that anymore, right? We can't do it anymore. We need to, aye, that's the point I was going to make, right? And I hope there's a person, somebody like a black American or something, or maybe somebody in the UK who's just not white. Do you understand that some white people are going to be weird around you? They're going to treat you differently because of the way you look to them. And it's not because they're racist, it's because they're trying their best not to be racist. You ever experienced that? Like, they're just pure weird and they're pure fake with you. It's like nothing you say or anything that you do, they'll always see it in a particular light because of the way you look. That's the issue. You know what I'm saying, right? Like, there's a type of white person that is so fucking scared of being called racist that they breathe a sigh of relief if they can convince you somebody else is racist. It's like, oh my God, man. Like my friend at work, Joel, I think he's from Uganda originally. And he would tell me, you know, he would tell me and disclose, and I would be a confidant to him about some of this stuff that would go on, you know, about just the strangeness that he would experience from certain people. And that's the difference, you know. I don't want to get into all that, but I don't know. I you know, I'm a social scientist. I've got a background in psychology and a background in sociology and a background in counseling and education. These things matter to me. These issues are my wheelhouse. I haven't written on them extensively. The guy who wrote that book, Dr. Lou, I think he's originally from an African country. He might be living in America now. I might get that wrong, but I got the impression that he had strong African roots. And he talks about multiculturalism. I would love to discuss these ideas with an expert, because I just feel like there's a lack of finesse in extremely guilt-ridden white people, and they tend to be left-leaning, and they just have this unease around, or just this fakeness around difference, right? Like, and again, I don't mean to be unkind if you're on the left or the right. I don't mean to, be blowing smoke here. But if you sit down, if you watch any comedians, right? If you see the way that, I don't know, Theo Vaughn, do you know who Theo Vaughn is? He's a comedian from Louisiana. If you see the way that he speaks to a black comedian, oh man, it is so natural. Everybody's dead relaxed. It doesn't matter what you say because we're all having a good time, right? There's love between us, right? It's not like I'm not going to say anything stupid. I'm not going to hit the N word or something like that. I'm not going to do that just to be edgy, but we're going to have a good time. We're going to play with each other and it's going to be great. That's what life should be, man. That's what life would be. But some of these, I hate to say it, but that's what it feels like to me, is like far left white people. It's women. It's far left white women. No, it's not, but they just don't know how to be normal. And the thing is, look, people are going to disagree with you as well, right? You might find someone from a different background with black skin or whatever would turn around to me and say, no, actually, Willie T, you're wrong. Well, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to say, no, you're wrong. And if, oh my God, I can't believe you said that someone who doesn't look like you is wrong. It's like, no, that's what you do when you respect someone. You tell them the truth, right? So obviously, clearly the data's all here, and I can post it in the comments. The data's in Europe. Multiculturalism, as it's being practiced, the experiment has failed. In fact, our Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that the experiment of multiculturalism has done unmitigated damage to the United Kingdom. I think that's the exact quote that Keir Starmer gave. And that's the most left-wing leader in the country right now. He said that, right? So this isn't coming from a place of far-right extremism. This is just somebody who is lamenting some of the problems that are going on in the UK right now. And I've never spoke about them as candidly as this. So I just wanted to get that out. And again, that's not coming from a bad place. It's coming from a place of concern. So that's why I felt this was an important petition to sign. And if we look on the map, you can see where this mattered most. Now, you got the whole country in this map. If I do like this, you can see, right? So you can see Scotland. And isn't this interesting? You would think that freedom meant more to the Scottish people, wouldn't you? Freedom, right? Nah. It clearly matters more to these. The interesting thing is, right, talking about ethnicities and differences, right? So everybody lives up here, right? All these people up here, the Scots, we're a different ethnicity to the people that live down here, right? The English are made up of Anglo-Saxons, Normans, who are people who invaded in 1066. They come from the north of France, and some Vikings, but also Celts. So the people up here are actually a bit more Celtic, these English people here. And a lot of the Scottish conquest, like you've heard a lot about Scotland and England, William Wallace, right? But to be honest with you, that was against Normans, not necessarily Anglo-Saxons. So the classic idea that the Scots have beef with the English isn't quite right. Although many English will say, yeah, well, Norman heritage is still English heritage. But there's a little point of nuance to be made there. So these people were liked it. But if you look on this map, you can see where I'm from. I'm from here, right? This little part here. So that's one of the places in Scotland where we got the most signatures. You can see up at the top left, we've got 234 signatures there. And then down here, we got 231. So yeah, we're getting a little bit rivalry there from Dumfries and Galloway. But North Ayrshire and Arran, we whooped ass on this issue. Because this is the point of what I'm trying to say to you guys. Telling the truth matters. Now, you might not like this video because it might... William, you're talking about a lot of heavy stuff here, man. You're talking about sexual assault and grooming gangs and cultural dynamics and stuff. That's tense stuff. Look, it shouldn't be. This petition makes it less tense to discuss as well, because, like, this is my wheelhouse. I'm currently doing a PhD in social science. I'm not speaking from a place of ignorance. I'm speaking from a place of, like, care. I care about these things. Could have said that better. I'm speaking from a place of care, bruh. Isn't it interesting that London didn't really tend to care as much? And of course, Great Yarmouth is the place that got the most signatures. They're approaching 1,000 now, because that's where the MP is from, Rupert Lowe, who came up with this. Now, it used to be illegal to speak the truth. In fact, William Tyndale, who you all remember, was killed by the state for translating the Bible into English. Yeah, that was a crime. And then you've got things like the Conventicle Act, where it was a crime in England to gather together to worship God outside of the auspices of the Church of England. Again, what is going on? Right? These are incredibly oppressive ways to govern a community, a nation. So the Trinity is one of these things too, right? Because the Trinity became one of these issues where you were no longer permitted to muse on what God, well, how to identify God or describe God. Like, there became a set way to do it. And you should be curious about that, because there's nothing in the Bible that says that you have to describe God as a 3-in-1 situation, right? The ousia and the hypostasis. There's nothing in the scripture about that, but it became important. And I want to share with you why that happened. Let's just hear what these guys have to say.
What God is there in heaven or on earth who can do according to your works, according to your mighty deeds? O Yahweh, God of Israel, there is no God like you in the heavens above or in earth beneath. For you, O Yahweh, are most high over all the earth. You are highly exalted above all gods. I mean, we can kind of go on and on and on.
Mhm.
There's
We'll get into more verses about
Yeah.
that, God's transcendence in Scripture, because Jacob doesn't seem to, he doesn't think it's there, from what I can gather.
Anyways, IP, Inspiring Philosophy, is one of these people that Daniel highlighted in one of his videos. Like, IP is the kind of person that will call, in fact, it was IP on an IP podcast that full preterism get called heretical, evil, and unbiblical, right? So that's where he's coming from. He's a no good piece of trash, right? He's a no good piece of trash. And I'm only joking. I don't like to say mean things about people. Like, I was probably in a place at some point in my life where I maybe looked down on people who believe differently to me. I don't even know if I was. I used to, when I was a young teenager, like 13, 14, I would look up my favorite actors and stuff to see if they were Christians. And then if they weren't quite the right sect, I would be like, oh, they're not going to be in heaven. Oh, man. They were my favorite actor as well. Oh, damn. Like, that's where my heart was. Like, I didn't want to hurt people who didn't believe the same things I believed. I was just so sad, right? Because I was obviously right and they were doing something wrong by, that would upset God. So clearly something in my heart understood that was unfair. So Trinitarianism, let's explain it. So I wrote a little article here. It's only 3 paragraphs. In the centuries following Christ, Christianity began to articulate its central mysteries in the language and categories of the surrounding philosophical world. Among the most influential of these frameworks was Neoplatonism, a school of thought deeply preoccupied with the divine ordering, hierarchy, and the procession of being from a singular source. This metaphysical architecture, which envisioned the cosmos flowing through the one, through nous, which means mind, and psyche, which means soul, offered a powerful conceptual tool for thinking about divine reality. Early church fathers, particularly those steeped in Greek thought, began to adopt elements of this structure as they wrestled with how to speak of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The Father came to be seen as the source, the Son as the logos or divine reason, and the Spirit as the final procession completing a triune pattern. Though not identical to Neoplatonism, the parallels are unmistakable. The theological challenge was no longer simply affirming the presence of God in three persons, but explaining how these three persons related within a single divine essence without slipping into polytheism. This is where the influence of Neoplatonism's structure began to shape Christian doctrine more decisively. The urge to define, to map the ineffable with philosophical clarity, led to the formalization of the Trinity using categories such as ousia and hypostasis. Mystery gave way to metaphysics, the relational, narrative heart of the gospel, rooted in Hebraic thought and expressed in story, covenant, and lived experience, was gradually recast in the mold of philosophical abstraction. In some ways, this development safeguarded Christian doctrine against confusion and heresy, but in so doing, it also distanced the faith from its original texture. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob became a being to be classified, charted, and categorized. What had begun as revelation was now managed through metaphysical procession. Neoplatonism did not invent the Trinity, but it helped Christianity feel the need to explain God in a logical system, subtly shifting the church off the path of mystery and into a world of definitions. And I just think, like, regardless of how eloquently you can describe the triune nature of God, if you think you have come any closer to describing God than I have doing this, then you're a fool, because your poetic description of the Trinity and me doing this, that's about as close to one another. Like that, if you were to define God, we're so close. We are so close compared to what God actually is. We are so close. Me doing this is so close to Trinitarianism compared to what God actually is. Because if you think you have sewn it all up, put a neat little bow on it, and you have defined God, there's no mystery left. There's no mystery left. In fact, if you think you can define God in any other way, you're a heretic. That's what we'll say. That's the kind of confidence and, deftness we'll bring to this, and subtlety we'll bring to this conversation. If you don't think that God's triune, we will kill you. How about that? Christianity, you know what I mean? It's like, no, there's an issue here. It's clear something's went wrong, right? God is love. Wow. In him there is no darkness at all. Perfect religion to God is caring for the widow and the orphan. Perfection to God is to love your enemy as, to show love upon your enemy. To do good to your neighbor. Like, these are qualities that resonate. These are things that make sense. And then if you think about people with cognitive deficits, if you think about people who might have more profound non-verbal autism, if you think about people who might have profound Down syndrome that impacts their mental agility, do you think God's tossing them all into hell? Do you think that they are damned or heretics because they can't express the subtleties of the Trinity? And if you don't think that, then, okay, God works on a sliding scale. This is fantastic news. So I guess then everyone with an IQ over 140, the people in Mensa, well, they get to, they'll use cool PowerPoint presentations with all kinds of graphs and splendid formulas to display the Trinity, right? And the people with more average IQ, around 100, like, we'll draw an egg with the yolk and the white and the shell. And then everyone with a IQ less than 60, well, they can do this. I might have just outed myself there as someone with an IQ of 60. I mean, what I'm saying? It's like, this is insane. I mean, I might have made that more insane than it actually is, but it's crazy. God isn't working like that. God isn't an inquisitor, and God isn't going to be satisfied with you because you said that God is a triune God. You know, keep it simple. You know, Jesus said they will say, Lord, Lord. Then they'll say, I got away from me. I don't know who you are. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, you guys. This is kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of messed up. Speaking of which, at this point, I'd like to play a piece of music. No, don't go anywhere. If you're of a certain age, like if you're probably between 25 and 70, you might recognize this piece of music, okay? And it's going to strike you as odd that I'm going to play this piece of music. You're going to think to yourself, dude, you can't play that song. But I'll play a little bit of it and then you'll recognize it. You'll think, what the hell? How did I know that? And then I'll explain, okay? The band that plays this song refused to play it after the incident in the early 2009? Or was it 2000? I think it was about 2009. Was it 2006? I wrote an article on it that I want to share with you. But the reason I bring it up is because this is entirely relevant to the discussion we're having tonight. What happened to Chris Benoit? If you don't know, Chris Benoit was a Canadian professional wrestler born in Montreal in 1967. And he got acclaim as the Rabid Wolverine Chris Benoit. I believe he was quite big in WCW, and then he came to WWE. He's quite a short, stocky guy, so the Wolverine thing worked with him. And he was an absolutely incredible performer. And then we got news that he passed away. I think I was still in high school, so it must have been like 2004 or 5 or 6 or something. Let's look it up. When did Chris Benoit die? 2007, right? So 2007, on that fateful night, Chris Benoit killed his youngest son, killed his wife, and then killed himself. Now, you might think, William, why are you bringing this up? Well, it should fit the tone of this video, because what happened to Chris Benoit is the same thing that's happening in Britain right now. It's the same thing going right back to the beginning, it's the same thing that's going on with Bonnie Blue. It's where sensationalism has overtaken meaning, and then shit hits the fan. Bad things happen because good people were not in the right place, or good people didn't have the voices to speak. And you might disagree with me on my take here, right? But this is what I have to say after a bit of reflection. So that was Chris Benoit's entrance music that you just listened to. And I actually think it's quite a cool jam, right? I think that's quite a cool song. It's called Whatever by Our Lady Peace, right? Whatever. And it's by the band Our Lady Peace. And the band only recently started playing the song this year after almost 20 years of hiatus. And I've come to what feels like a more honest and enlightened position on Benoit. Some point to CTE, these concussive injuries and diminished capacity, and maybe that played a role, but he murdered his wife, his youngest son, and then himself, and there's no spinning that, right? You can't spin that into being less evil than it was. It was evil, and it's a moral injury to society, to wrestling, and to wrestling fans, right? Still, I see it as part of a much wider tragedy than just one man's actions. He's ultimately responsible, But calling it a lone wolf act, that doesn't capture the whole picture, if you ask me. His persona, the rabid Wolverine, right, speaks to the instability and how that was used in the gimmick. And I think it was worsened by the culture around him at the time. Now, there's a notorious interview that Chris Benoit gave when his best friend Eddie Guerrero died. So Eddie Guerrero passed away, and you could see Chris Benoit doing a bit to camera, and he says these strange words. He says something like, you know, whenever I felt like things were going wrong, Eddie Guerrero would talk me out of doing it. And I'm thinking to myself, what did he just say? Like, in the light of what happened, I'm thinking, what did he just say? What was going on there? So Eddie Guerrero seemed to be the person that Benoit hinged his emotional stability on, right? And Eddie Guerrero died. But Eddie Guerrero died unnecessarily because the same culture rewarded pushing through pain. Now, there's something to be said for having grit. But Eddie Guerrero died at 38 years old. That's not grit. That's unhealthy. That's improper risk management. Something went wrong there. And now what had happened to Eddie Guerrero is he'd been abusing drugs, steroids and everything else, and his heart was enlarged and his arteries were like McDonald's plumbing, right? He hadn't been looking after himself physically. Now, the thing is, if Eddie Guerrero had been screened properly, then they could put him on a course of ACE inhibitors, put him on some statins, and he could have moved into a backstage role, and Eddie Guerrero would have lived into his 80s, right? There's people walking around who get heart failure, and it doesn't feel good, it's not going great. But once you get on the proper treatment, even people who have injured their hearts can live into their 80s. It's not a death sentence. But Eddie Guerrero, you seen the film The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke? That's what Eddie Guerrero decided to do. Push through the pain. And he didn't make it. So my point that I'm making is that the broken heart wasn't a lone wolf act either. It wasn't a lone act. This is the part I want you to remember. It was death by 1,000 shrugged shoulders. Right? That goes back to the point that Daniel's making. Not Daniel the prophet, Daniel Rogers. About that, what he's feeling about himself, his heart being moved, and how he wants to do more for the community and his sphere of influence. Well, if Daniel had continued down a trajectory of only doing the head stuff and not doing the heart stuff, then he would probably end up in a dark place. And how would that would have happened by a death through 1,000 shrugged shoulders. It's the same thing that Jesus was talking about. Let the dead bury the dead. Well, how did those spiritually dead end up spiritually dead? By 1,000 shrugged shoulders. Meh. I don't care. I'll just shrug my shoulders. Okay, we'll change this, we'll change that. We'll deviate so many times. We'll shrug our shoulders so much that we come off the path. That's what killed Eddie Guerrero. The broken heart wasn't a lone act. It was a death by 1,000 shrugged shoulders. It was a long trail of bad decisions and a complicit ethos of not giving a fuck. Pardon the French. And it was exactly the same with Chris Benoit. It was the same with his mind breaking. Earlier interventions from a culture that cared could have saved them both. And when you save both of those men, you save their families as well. So I'm left feeling the tragedy. For sure, I'm left feeling the tragedy. But I'm more sympathetic. I spelt that wrong here. I'm more sympathetic and hopeful, that there's lessons to be learned. And WWE, the wrestling, they have learned those lessons. They screen and they do it a lot more differently. Right? It's not the same business that it once was. So I don't know if I'm settled on that analysis, but it feels more evolved to me. And I think it speaks to some of the issues we've been talking about tonight. It's like the grooming gangs here in the United Kingdom with all these girls that got their lives ruined. That was 1,000 shrugged shoulders, right? That's what shrugging your shoulders does. It kills Eddie Guerrero. It kills Chris Benoit. It kills the future of these wee girls. You know, and like the WWE at the time, oh, wrestlers keep dying. Yikes. Wonder why that's happening. That's what's happening with these councils and the police officers. Well, you know, hey, people keep getting drugged up and molested. Well, that's not on me. It's the exact same thing that happened in Jesus' day as well. You know, whoa, you know, we'll just start selling more wares in the temple and neglecting the spiritual health of the culture. I'm sure God will be fine with that. That's not on us, you know. Nah. We have to take responsibility to manifest the kingdom. That is very much squarely planted on our shoulders, and it is a joy. It is a you know, it's just to be vested with that kind of mission is a joy, you know? Yeah, man, that's true. We can walk through the valley of the shadow of death, but we have such life within us that all we're really doing is taking note of the geography around about us, you know? We can be affected by it, but you're not stopped by it, you know? You're not stopped by it at all. You are, well, you know, what do you think about this metaphor? I wrote this down when I woke up. Does this work? I don't know if this works. I haven't thought about it. I just wrote it down. Faith. Faith is a hose. Does that work? Faith is a hose? You know, like a fire truck. They come out with their hose and they attach the hose to a fire hydrant, right? So your let's draw it. Got my little piece of paper here, right? So how would this work? So we're gonna need a fire hydrant, folks. We're gonna make this work. You know how I was going through the sliding scale of IQ and how you describe the Trinity. This is how you do it with the 60 IQ when you're trying to describe faith. So you need a source. Okay, let's call this a source here, right? It's like a fire hydrant, right? And then you need your faith. Okay, you got your faith. And then you got the, maybe the fireman. Like we can be the fireman in this equation. There we go, we got a little fireman there. And then you can take the product of your faith, because the hose is the faith that something runs through. Grace, perhaps? And then grace comes out here. Guys, I don't like what I'm doing here, man. Like, people can make fun of me for this, man. You know what I'm saying? I think you know what I'm saying. And I don't need to illustrate it with this drawing that people will satirize with their unkind ways. So, guys, I'm aware that I've neglected the chat, but I'm just assuming that everybody's just agreeing with me and saying, you know what, everything you've said is totally chill. We're not bothered about all those problematic things you've said tonight. No, but you get the point of what I'm saying there, right? Faith is a hose. Let's work on that, right? I might write a little piece about that and see if I can make it make more sense. Or maybe you could in the chat and try and describe it in a bit more detail. So there's something else I want to show you tonight. It's a picture I took earlier today, and it's this. Can you see that? This is relevant, by the way. This is relevant. So that's a frog. I rescued a bunch of tadpoles from what you might call a puddle. There's a type of there's an ephemeral puddle, a puddle that disappears So when a frog lays its spawn in a puddle that's, going to dry up, then they'll all die. From a spawn of 2,000 eggs, only one frog will make it to adulthood. Just one. So when I saw this puddle that was about to dry up when I was out walking the dog one day, I decided to rescue a segment of the spawn. Took it home, put it in a tank, and then I fed them. And it was pretty cool. I fed the little tadpoles. They started off just as little black dots. And then I now own 40 frogs. I'm just trying to get them a little bigger than this so that predators won't eat them. And then I'll pop them off up the cycle track or something where there's nice pond water. I might even try and keep one or two as a pet, because aren't they just gorgeous animals? So here's the point about the frog, okay? So this frog here is called Rana temporaria. Anybody who speaks Spanish or Italian will know that Rana just means frog, and temporaria, what does it sound like? Just means temporary. So Aristotle, in his great wisdom, suggested that frogs spontaneously generated from mud, and that maggots spontaneously generated from rotten flesh, that mice also spontaneously generated from murky situations, and so did eels and oysters. They came from the froth of the sea. Now you might think, William, that's stupid. And you would be right to think that's stupid. It's called reasoning from analogy. It's where you make a reason that's not grounded in reason. Instead, you're just kind of looking at the world round about you, observing something in a half-assed manner, and then coming out with a thought. We do that a lot here. We do that a lot here. So what Aristotle did was lay this terrible thesis out. And do you know how long that was believed for? 2,211 years. Yes, that's right. Spontaneous generation was believed right up until 1861. So what's that? That's my definitely my great-great-great-grandfather. Yeah. So his generation thought that certain creatures just spontaneously generated out of some immaterial ether. And the reason I bring that up is because it goes back to the idea of, I think, Daniel's physicalism, when he says he's not a full preterism and he's waiting in expectation. And he said, I really think that Jesus will overcome death. It's like, dude, you're a full preterist. You know this. Death has been overcome. Do not trust your senses to explain to you subtleties of the spirit. The flesh will not do that for you. You're being asked to go a wee bit deeper. Only insofar as you want to, though. Right? You don't have to do this to be a right Christian. You don't have to think about any of this. Gee willikers, you know? You could just be out there having a nice, happy life, living in a little farmstead with multiple generations of your family, petting a family dog, cooking a nice roast on Sunday. Everybody's just happy. Everybody's just smiling. Somebody's making music. And you don't know any of this stuff. And God loves you so much. God just loves you so much. Right? You don't need to know this stuff. But if you want to, if you choose to walk this particular path, which is that little extra seasoning with the theology in it, it doesn't make you any more special. God doesn't love you any more for thinking about this stuff. But if you're going to, you better do it my way, you know? You don't have to do it my way. But if you're going to, I think there's a certain elegance you can achieve. There's levels to this. And I'm not saying I'm the highest level. That would be, that'd be a massive mistake. That'd be an impediment to growth. But I think I think Daniel would benefit. What an unhumble thing to say. Daniel would benefit from a conversation with me. That's not. I don't mean that. I don't mean that. I would benefit. Sorry, that's the yes. I would benefit from a conversation with Daniel. And just by the way, I said this last night. I have no doubts in my mind that Daniel is a superior theologian to me. I think that Daniel's probably a much brighter young man with lots of mental agility and energy. I don't see myself as superior to him in any way, shape, or form. I never would, and I couldn't. I don't do that with people. I told you I used to work in care with people who had chromosome issues and stuff, and so they developed differently. And I used to work with this one guy who had Prader-Willis syndrome, but a unique form of it where you couldn't quite tell that he had it. And it leads to certain cognitive things, and the way you look can be a little bit different, and it's like an insatiable appetite you can have, and you'll just eat yourself to death. So we had to keep him out of the kitchen and stuff and cook his meals for him and everything. But I used to love this guy. I mean, he had I haven't spoken a while because it's against GDPR to stay in contact once you leave the work. But just such a lovely guy. I've kind of lost my train of thought just thinking about how much. So in my head, whenever I went to work with one of these clients that we had, I would be thinking, right, this is a much more luminous, glorious angel of the Lord than I am. It is my benefit to be here because God sees all. And on the other side of this thing, God's looking down on this moment. This moment's already passed. Everything that's happening right now is already past. It's already millennia in the distant memory. We're already all somewhere else in the future. This is just like an old story that's playing out, right? Not to diminish the significance of it, but just to give grandeur to this perspective I'm bringing. So that's how we can look at the current moment, right? It's like this is already all past and we're already elsewhere. And I imagine in my head, on the other side of this thing, this guy that incarnated into this particular life, this client of mine, well, you know what? What a life to live. The challenges this guy's going through, the frustrations, the everything else that's going on in his life. This must be the most glorious angel. So I'm going to see this as a gift to be here, to share a meal. Oh, the long walks we used to go on, man. And all the things we would talk about and the laughs that we would have. It's just true that I loved this individual. I do love them. And, man, I miss those days. That was good. And that's the kind of beauty you need to infuse every day with. C.S. Lewis said that, didn't he? C.S. Lewis said, if you could see the mesmerizing majesty of what a human being actually is, then, oh my goodness, you would not take anyone for granted ever again in your life. I agree with those sentiments. Yeah, those sentiments. They define how I see humanity. So don't get it twisted. Whenever I decry crime or see flaws in the way society's structured, never think that I'm saying that some people are less than other people. I would never go there. I can't, because I know what people are. And I know what we're not. None of us are this. Apparently, this is what we are for a couple of decades, and then we're something else. And I think that's the answer to Daniel's question about his grandmother, who he says suffered with cancer. And he's like, I hope that's not the case for everyone. I hope humans in the future don't have to suffer with cancer and stuff. And I just think to myself, look, Daniel, you need to understand something. Your grandmother, that beautiful woman who lived that rich, full life, who suffered pain and loss, but also great happiness and cherished the day she held you as a child, that woman, you know her no longer according to the flesh, but she is a magnificent, angelic, just beautiful, beautiful person right now, beyond our comprehension. Who knows how she involves herself in your life today and what she's up to in the other realms. But I can tell you something. It's a lot better than this world. Whatever perfection you think you could bring into this material realm, nah. All you're doing is compromising the experience of humans. All you're doing is diminishing the existence of humanity. Because humans are this. And it's frustrating and it's limiting, but it's who we are. It's how we are. It's how we have faith in God. But the thing is, this is where I agree with Daniel Rogers. I agree that things could be better. You have heard me lament criminality. You have heard me lament the ethos of the culture. You have heard me lament the loss of heroes and where heroes turn to villains. And yeah, that's part of the texture of this world, but it doesn't have to define it. No, we in our spheres of influence can lift this world up. We can elevate it. We can transcend some of these lesser, worse proclivities. And how we do that is through peace and prosperity and helping people understand that they are loved, that the competitive natures that we have, the competitive cultures that we have, they don't need to be so competitive. They don't need to compete so hard. Right? Saudi Arabia hates Iran because one's Sunni and one's Shia. We need to find a solution to that. You know, we need to find a solution to that. Certain communities in Northern Ireland still have history. That's cooling. That's cooling. I mean, you could study the old sort of enemies that have since found peace, like the Scottish and the English. Well, how did Scotland and England come together? We married our kings and queens and princes and princesses together to form alliances, because then we had mutual interest in one another's prosperity. I don't think we can go back to that. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that's still going to work, but we need to find some kind of corollary. That sounds like a leprechaun's stick. But we need to find a shillelagh that will, you know what I mean, resemble what we used to do when we used to give what princes and princesses to one another to bring the kingdoms together. And then there's just competitive faiths claims as well. There's intra-faith dilemmas, and then there's outside faiths that compete. And look, what we need to realise is that our humanity, our shared humanity, and how we relate to God personally is above all that. Right? It's like what I say about full preterism. Yeah, the book has a lot of stuff in it that's relevant to those interested in the best arguments for it, analysing the scriptures. But some of the juiciest parts of this book, oh, this is the hardback. Oh yeah, I had to get myself the hardback, because this is a work of art at the same time. I really appreciate how the graphic designer caught the inspiration that I had for this. So I'm really happy with it. So yeah, there's so much of this book that's just that's the scholarship and stuff, and it's juicy. But there's also this, you know, this segment at the back, section 3, that goes into all that kind of stuff that Daniel wants to learn more about. So let's move into that third section, right? No rush, everybody, by the way. Take your time reading the book if you're taking your time with it. No rush. But when you get to that third segment, stretch your legs with it. You know, let it work on you. You know, there's some powerful metaphors in there. wee things that just come to you, wee things you intuit. Because that could be a very there could be a lot of hubris in a section like that. Like, who am I to talk about how a full preterist should live their life? You know, where does that come from? Well, to a certain degree, I could draw upon my experience, you know, just looking academically at social science and stuff. But then I can also consider my own humanity. I can sit and try and intuit like really interesting ideas and ways of framing things that feel original to me. So I'm proud of how it ended up. You know, I read through the book and I asked myself, is there anything I would change about it? And there was one or two wee bits, but there's just wee small things, nothing content-wise that I would change. Just a couple of wee bits there where it's like, it's kind of like I just wrote the same thing there, you know? And then I thought to myself, not really, you know? I could see how in that one it would have this effect, but then when you read it here, it's got a slightly different effect. So artistically, yeah, I think it works. Even in those rare instances where I could see wee tweaks that could be made. So there we go. Faith is a hose. My goodness, how did we get here? Let me show you another picture. I will turn to the chat. I don't know what's happening in that chat. Maybe nobody's watching tonight. Maybe everybody's watching and they're saying, why are you ignoring us? We're saying really intricate, important stuff here, guys. No, I will turn my attention to the chat. But let me show you a picture. Here we go. All right. Can you see this? All right. Does anyone know what that is? Some people are going to be saying, that's a duck, man. You tricked me again. Do you know what kind of duck that is? Its stature's, you know, it's standing quite tall. You might think it's a runner, but it's not actually a runner. It might have runner heritage because it did come from a flock where there was some runner, but that's what they call a cayuga duck. A cayuga duck. Now, what is a cayuga duck? Why do I have one? Well, I've got two because I'm crazy. Because we've got a little backyard flock going on here. And we can have some nice duck eggs, etc. But the cayuga duck is, that one hatched in the 14th of June this month. And, you know, they say that all the birds today are descended from theropods like T-Rex and Velociraptor. So you don't have to believe that. That's just what they say, right? Personally, I've got no qualms with the science of that, but I know some people do. But it's a very chill breed of duck, and it comes from, does anybody know, Cayuga? Just like all kind of cool sounding names like that. It's from a Native American tribe. In Florida, I had a lot of fun in a place called Itchituckney. I went to Itchituckney Springs. Isn't that just brilliant? Itchituckney. And then there's another place called Chattanooga. Chattanooga? I was like, what is going on in the USA? But I just love the sounds that Native Americans come up with, man. Just absolutely gorgeous. So, Cayuga ducks originated in the 1800s at the Finger Lakes. Okay, so one of the Finger Lakes in upstate New York, right? And one of them is called Cayuga Lake, where they bred this. Now, there's a really interesting point here. I'm not just riffing, right? Well, I just went insane. The heat hasn't got to me, and he's just talking about ducks now. No, listen. Very interestingly, this tribe, the Cayuga Nation, there was a confederation of like 6 different tribes that came together, right? And they had a saying. I'm going to butcher this. Gaiwio. Just giving life to that term. Gaiwio. Right? What does that mean? It means righteous teaching. Now, these people this Cayuga Nation, they were doing this righteous teaching, or otherwise you might interpret it as the great law of peace. It predates Christianity, or at least Christianity within their community. It doesn't. I don't think it predates Christianity necessarily. I haven't studied it that closely, but I think it predates Christianity entering into their communities. It's just an idea that they had. Well, where did it come from? Well, there's a really interesting story about one of their prophets. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that. Sganyodaio, and then what looks like a question mark, a half question mark written at the end of the name. But this individual, one of the prophets, he had a vision, a dream, otherwise known as a near-death experience, okay? And the question for me, right, is, did this guy have a near-death experience and come back with the gospel? So wouldn't you like to know if that happened? So let's find out if that did happen. The pronunciation. Also, what were the details of his NDE? Okay, so the guy's name. So this guy, he was also known as Handsome Lake. I think Handsome Lake is one of the names of the Finger Lakes. Right, you get the Cayuga Lake, and then you've got Handsome Lake, which was also this guy's name. But it looks like the original Native American pronunciation was Sganyodaio. Why am I doing a weird accent? Sganyodaio? Yeah, there you go. Just Sganyodaio. So in 1799, Handsome Lake, who was an aging alcoholic Seneca man, became severely ill and fell into a coma-like state. This is very NDE-like. During this period, believed by many to be near death, he experienced a vivid and powerful series of visions. These visions would form the foundation of Gaiuio, also known as the Good Message, the religious revitalization movement that he led afterward. So here's a summary of the vision. Trinitarians are going to love this. Point 1. 3 spirit beings appear. These figures, radiant and human-like, told him they were sent by the Creator. They told him that he was being given a second chance to teach his people how to live rightly. Point 2. Journey through the spirit world. He was shown the path of souls after death, including both good and wicked destinations. In vivid detail, he saw the suffering of people who had failed to live moral lives. Those who drank excessively, were unfaithful, greedy, or abused others. This part resembled other cross-cultural NDEs in which moral or spiritual consequences are revealed. A sidebar, what I will say there is, while we don't believe in eternal conscious torment, I do believe that there can be a certain gravity well of depravity in the afterlife, so that certain souls of a certain disposition can fall into the gravity of one another. Now, you can achieve escape velocity, you can leave these places, but I do think that some people go through that refiner's fire of hubris and jealousy and depravity and kind of find themselves there in some regards, maybe not, you know what I mean? I just think that it's possible. And it's not to say they're tormented forever, it's not that. It's more like just a royal rumble of people being silly until they find sense. Point 3, a warning to his people. He was told that alcohol, violence, sexual immorality, and the abandonment of tradition were destroying the Haudenosaunee people. okay, you could see some utility in maintaining the traditions. I certainly would see myself as something of a traditionalist, and someone who appreciates institutions when they're run properly. He was to preach against these evils and restore the old ways, including longhouse ceremonies, communal values, and respect for clan systems. Well, good. I mean, that just sounds kind of wholesome, right? Vision of a coming fire. Handsome Lake saw a future of destruction if people did not change. This part of the vision was apocalyptic and moralistic, a fire that would consume the wicked unless repentance occurred. Totally false, guys. That goes against full preterism. I'm only joking. I think that could be understood in terms of, like some kind of fire in terms of hardship that is visited upon you should you depart from ways of righteousness. I think that makes sense. And if I'm actually feeling a little bit refreshed and convicted by this story, because I can see all the shortcuts I take and the excesses that I might have, where I don't hone my being and I let myself kind of ooze into those things I would rather not ooze into. So I'm getting a little something from this. Let's see where it goes. Gift of prophetic authority. The messengers told him he had been chosen to carry this message from the Creator, not as a political leader, but as a moral and spiritual reformer. That's good, as long as he's not accumulating wealth onto himself, right? Because that could be seen as self-serving and thus nullifies the validity of the claim, because it's just a shyster. But, if he's just being a bit more humble with it, I mean, I don't know how humble you can be declaring yourself to be a messenger of the Creator, but in a way, aren't we all messengers from the Creator? Maybe a little bit. Finally, it says here, he was returned to life with new strength, abandoning alcohol and beginning to preach immediately. Now, I find that quite interesting because at no point is Christianity or Jesus mentioned, and yet this is like something Jesus might say. To turn away from immorality and to respect the traditions and the values and to come together with your ceremonies and to live as a people. And if you don't do these things, then, hardship will come, judgment will come against you. So try to see to it that you live in accordance with these ways. And I don't find that entirely problematic. I think Handsome Lake came away with a little something there. So Handsome Lake's teachings became known as the Code of Handsome Lake, or Gehuayo. His message blended traditional Haudenosaunee spirituality with Christian-influenced moral reform, especially from nearby Quakers. He gained thousands of followers, and his movement still exists today, especially among the Seneca and some Onondaga and Cayuga. So, what do we make of that? A little bit of what might sound like a good news message, perhaps. Does it sound like a good news message? I don't know, but it's certainly about grounding oneself in virtue and building communities along traditional paths that avoid alcohol, violence, sexual immorality. That these things are an issue. Obviously, there's no, I don't know if temperance is being advocated here, but certainly the avoidance of violence and sexual immorality and stuff, because that's part of the plague that I lamented in a great deal of this video tonight, was the plague of sexual immorality that's broken out across the United Kingdom with Bonnie Blue and with the rape gangs. So, yeah, there's something to be said for those things. Let's turn our attention now to the live stream and see if we've got any chat tonight. No way, not a single comment. Nothing at all. Oh, no, it's because it's unlisted. Oh, I can't believe this. So, right, I guess everyone will have to watch this one in post. I've been talking as if this thing has been going out to everyone live, and I guess it hasn't. So I'm going to go ahead and end the stream and my 2 hour and 8 minute long embarrassment. Anyways, to everyone who watched this, richest of blessings to you. Hope you have a pleasant start to your new week. Ultimately, I want to end on this note of hope. The hope is the promises have been fulfilled. They have been. We can enjoy the fact that, you know, God has endowed us to live out this truth. And he's given us an amplifier for it. So let's use that, right? Let's use it. Let's get it done. Okay, now that I've made this public, should I just wait? Because I just changed the settings right there. Should I just wait and let some people join me live? Yeah, I think I might do that. That may be a fairer thing to do. But then people who join live might be 2 hours and 9 minutes behind. So I'll just say at this point in the video, I have been speaking for 2 hours and 9 minutes to myself. I thought that this was live streaming publicly, but it was unlisted, so no one saw it. And I don't have the energy to go through everything that I spoke about today. It was actually quite an emotionally draining video, this one. So, yeah, there'll be something in there for everyone, I'm sure. But I'm just gonna dive out, just say hello. But yeah, just to say, yeah, I've been talking for 2 hours to myself because I forgot to post it publicly. I posted it privately. Thank you. God bless. And I'll see you on the next one. I'll get it right next time, right? I'll get it right next time. Gotta love it. But yeah, hopefully I'll be able to speak to Daniel soon. I'll reach out to him after this video, okay? All right. God bless. And